Hello and welcome to the Meaningful Podcast. Whether you're hitting record on your phone for the first time or working on your next big production, we're going to tackle all the big tips, tools, tricks, advice, everything to get you covered. Today we've got Sean Egan with us, professional audio, everything, from artist, musician to working on set with some big names. We're going to go through everything that you need to know about audio today. So thank you so much for being on the show. I'm going to start off with a little bit of a funny. I was looking at your website and I read that, I'm going to read it here, that it was seeing a craft service table while working with your dad that kind of made you wanted to join the craft. And I kind of want to just pick, what did they have on the crafty? Because we love our crafties. Yeah. But also, is there more to that story that kind of got you? Basically, a roundabout way of asking, how'd you get into the industry?
I mean, I am admittedly a bit of a nepo baby, you know, and I say that proudly, only because I'm extremely proud of what my dad has done for this community, and for sound in this state. There's only a handful of us, but yeah, I mean, my dad was a sound mixer, and He did a lot of like post-production stuff as well as location audio. Back in the day, it was a little bit of a different, setup just because everything was analog. They're doing reel-to-reel machines, DAT machines and stuff like that. So I came in at a really nice time. I graduated high school in 2002. And so like right as I started kind of boom-opping for him out of high school, everything was starting to go digital. Like the first digital recorder was coming out, and it was kind of a game changer because that's just how my mind worked. You know, it's like the digital stuff just clicked. But yeah, like I had been surrounded by it since I was a kid. My dad always told me that he taught me to thread a Nagra when I was 3. I don't remember any of that, nor could I do it now. But, I was just kind of surrounded by it, which was in of itself a huge thing just because, there's not a lot of, this isn't Hollywood, so it's weird to be surrounded and feel like you're like in this film production environment in like, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, or Shorewood, where I grew up.
Yeah.
But yeah, we would just like, it was always like visiting him on set was kind of cool. Going to the studio, it seemed like this magical place, and there's just like soda and candy everywhere. That's all I noticed as a kid was there's awesome computers and lots of sugar. And that still affects me today.
Everything a kid needs.
Yeah, right.
even if you're still a kid at heart.
Oh yeah, totally. No, I wear that proudly.
Same.
It was Sour Patch Kids on that Charles Bronson movie. It was some weird movie, and it was like a night shoot, and I remember going down there, and it was right on water in Wisconsin, and they'd shut down the whole place. It was like,
oh wow, okay.
Like it was like kind of a big deal, especially back in the 90s, and it's kind of a core memory. It just like stuck with me the whole time. And yeah, I kind of, after that, I was like, this is awesome. What my dad does is awesome. And then it took me a couple of years, like after I graduated high school, and the kind of weirdness of your 20s and like trying to figure out like, what do I want to do? Like, do I want to do what my dad does or whatever? And then he started kind of like pushing me a little bit, but kind of giving me space. And then, there's a couple people in town that gave me my first breaks. I think it was my first job was like a Trek bike commercial or something. Okay. And I think it was Pat Buckley, who was with Purple Onion at the time. And he was, so shout out to Pat Buckley for being a huge supporter since day one. And then when I first was like, oh, you can like get paid hundreds of dollars for doing this. And I was working at Jimmy John's at the time, and I was like, I get tips from like drunk college students, and then I was like, or I get a check from a bike company, and then I just started like kind of pursuing that, and right around 2010 I went self-employed fully and haven't really looked back. There was like a year where I worked at a music store.
Okay, but that's that perfect, like, I know this is the direction, but it's not there today. So here I can kind of pad it a little bit.
And it was weird. I mean, like balancing the like figuring out if I wanted to do music or sound, and like how to support all that stuff was a bit confusing at the time. So I was kind of like I needed music gear, but I wanted to pursue sound. But I got an opportunity for a local music place called Nova Music, which is now closed. But basically, I pretty much got all my music gear. I worked there for 11 months, and I looked at my receipts at the end of and I had spent every dollar that I made working there on gear. And that was just because I got away with that because I'd sold an annuity. I got in a car accident when I was a kid. And
Oh,
like,
okay.
I sold it to JG Wentworth. Again, shout out to JG Wentworth as well, sponsor for the
My
podcast.
money and I need it now.
Exactly. I needed it. And I'm, luckily I made a good decision where I bought equipment. I bought music and sound equipment that was going to like bring back a return. Yeah, it wasn't a total crazy thing. A judge in Florida was like, "Are you doing the right thing?" And I was like, "I got this, dude." And it turned out to be a really good, one of the first big investments into equipment that I made, and then just been doing that ever since, basically.
So what other lessons do you really credit your dad to in your work today?
That's an excellent question. Actually, I was just thinking about this the other day, because I'm a member of this, like, there's a Facebook group that is all sound mixers from across the country, and there's Academy Award winners in there, and there's kids just starting out, and it's this private group. It's actually kind of amazing. We all talk about rates and gear, and I made a post about rates, and people were asking, like, how do you get the rate that you're asking? Because sometimes I charge premium rates usually, and people were kind of like, how are you getting this? Especially in like a small market. And it was, I wrote a little post that was just like, you just got to ask for it. Yeah. And that's a huge thing. Like, the mentorship from my father wasn't just about like, microphones or recording or that kind of stuff, but it was like how to be self-employed, how to like assert yourself, and how to like present yourself, and like how to negotiate, and how to walk that fine line. It's a very difficult balance when you're self-employed, because you have to operate with the like passion, like the lack of passion and the objectiveness that like a business does. Pick and Save doesn't worry about, how they're gonna do, like, oh, I hope they like my store. Like, they don't care. They're operating a business and a service. But being self-employed, you kind of have to have that objectivity, but also at the same time, you're a flawed, scared human being in a crazy world, and you're trying to make money. So you're trying to, say like, I deserve this amount of money, but you're also like, I really need like $1,000 right now. So you're kind of like, you don't want to like underbid. But I think that's a huge lesson from my father that I've learned, is just like how to be self-employed. Because it's a delicate balance, and it's chaos sometimes.
Well, and I think the biggest thing is like, you can throw a number to somebody, and even if they say no to that, that doesn't mean no.
Totally.
They're not expecting that to be the end all answer once and for all. Mm-hmm. They know that there's going to be ups and downs and back and forth. So like, that's my own little piece of advice to people is, it's not, the first no is not always the only
you're
no.
Starting a conversation about it, and it all depends on like the producer and the client and what they're doing. If I get hit up by Microsoft, and like, or not by Microsoft, but a production company working for Microsoft, they're not gonna like, I tell them my rate, they're not gonna be like, oh, that's too high. They don't really care. But then some smaller companies, they're really trying to make their end as well. So and you don't want to like make people feel bad when they have a small budget, and you don't want to undervalue or undercut other people, and in this community especially, I mean, there's probably like 7 or 8 sound mixers in the state that are at the level that I'm trying to operate at. Yeah. And so you don't want to like, make anybody mad or like take any work away from them too. So yeah, it's not easy to walk those lines, but I enjoy it. I mean, it's kind of a thrill. It's kind of fun to play that game of like, how much are you going to pay me?
I'm going to put this down. Yeah. Let's see where that sits.
And most of the time, like, the truth is people are like afraid to ask for too much money and stuff. But like a lot of the time, you tell them your rate and they say, okay.
Right.
And like, let's get to work. Most people, like a good client cares more about the work than like pinching pennies,
Well, like, it's true, that meme of like, $5,000 client, great. Where do I send the check? $500 client, can we have 8,000 things? Totally.
and I often say that too, where it's like, you might lose a job because, and it's tough too sometimes, because you're like, hey, I this job would cost $1,500, and they're like, well, we have 1,000, and then you're like put in this position where you have to, am I gonna pass on $1,000? But you have to like be willing to kind of just say, fuck it. Are we allowed to swear?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay,
feel free. So they say a well-made video is 50% visual and 50% audio. Do you agree?
Yeah, I mean, I of course I'm biased, so, but I think that's a fair, it's definitely like a 50-50 thing, and I don't think, the picture or audio deserves more or less. But I do think that most productions operate on a visual is 80 to 90%, and audio is like if we can do it, and that's okay for a lot of the time, because there are certain situations where it's like, yeah, you want to get a pretty picture. I get it. This is a beautiful shot or whatever, but there's a big problem, and this I see this on the smaller stuff and big stuff too, where it's like they just it is an afterthought. It's not even like a sort of important to them, and it's like if there's dialogue, then audio should be very important. And sometimes I think, you said the 50-50 thing. I think there are circumstances where audio should be prioritized, and it is not. There's very few situations where they're like, what does audio need? I'm consistently working around camera.
Yeah.
And, like, I don't mind that dance. It's a dance that is absolutely necessary, and we're all there to facilitate the project or the director. It's a little different when it comes to narrative stuff versus like commercial work and advertising work, which is like a huge part of Milwaukee's market is commercial work. And like a big problem with all that too is like a lack of pre-production and a lack of like that's where for audio, that's where a lot of stuff can get worked out, because people expect like a location audio sound mixer to like show up and then I'm supposed to deliver the finished done audio, which is reasonable for smaller projects, but like people expect cinema quality sound, like consistently from me. And I don't think that a lot of people, even like producers, or even filmmakers, realize like what goes into cinema quality audio, which is like, there's like 20 people involved. Yeah. I'm one step. There's re-recording and ADR and Foley effects and post-production sound. Like there's so many people that make something sound perfect, and I pride myself on like, I'm able to get great audio on set frequently. But there are certain circumstances where it's like you show up and they're like, oh, we're going to be shooting with like a knight in shining armor and we got to get the audio perfect. And like, and there's clank and like nobody told me that before, like I made that up completely. I've never run into that situation, but it's people just don't think like, oh, we should tell the sound mixer about this. And it's tough too, because in an art like recording audio, it's like the smallest thing, how someone's body fits a particular type of clothing.
Yes.
Like what type of fabric it is. Like those are my problems sometimes, is like someone's wearing too starchy of a shirt. And then it's like, okay, well the lav, which has to be hidden, doesn't sound great. What do I do? Well, I still have the boom there, but then of course they're trying to get this wide shot, so I can't get the boom in. And so I'm given these circumstances which are like, you're fucked either way, kind of. And so and I still manage to get great stuff. But those are circumstances where it's like, what is the most important part of this particular shoot? Is getting the audio, or is it to make sure that you get the whole Bucks logo in the shot? And that's kind of like, some people are like, no, we need the Bucks logo in there. And I'm like, well, this is an important like scene and we should be trying to record, prioritizing the audio. And that just rarely happens. And I push for it hard, but I do pride myself on like, I just take whatever I'm given and I do the best I can. And I'm paying my bills, so I'm doing something right.
Exactly.
But yeah, it's kind of it's a bit of a thankless job occasionally, and I still love it. But oftentimes people do not understand what goes into it. They only hear something bad, and then they're like,
exactly.
And that's what they only notice when it's bad. If it's really good, they're like, yeah, that's what you're supposed to do. Like it's I'm like, okay, well, to work my ass off to get there.
Right. Exactly.
But yeah, it's and again, but I don't want to bitch too much. Like I'm very grateful, and everybody I've worked with.
Well, I want to let you have that space because it is true. I mean, I mentioned before we hit record, like I'm kind of the company's resident audio guy, and like I get it. I have empathy toward that, and I think like part of this conversation is maybe let's build a resonance of like respect the audio guy,
right.
Let the boom be in
also,
the shot,
and not to call you out, but I'm pushing very hard for a sound mixer, I'm
Right.
trying to take the gender out of it just because there are a bunch of really talented sound mixers of a variety of genders, and I don't want to exclude anybody. And I feel like that's been a big problem in
Yes.
the industry, and
Yes.
especially in where it's like sound guy is like a normal thing. I'm not trying to like
No.
I'd say it all the time.
I agree with you 100%.
Yeah, I always try to like catch myself and be like,
Yes.
okay, well, let's create an inclusive set and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, it's definitely a bit of a thankless job, but I don't know. That's kind of part of why we get paid what we get paid, is because it's like
If you do your job right, nobody will complain and nobody will come to you. But if you're not, well, you're the first one that they go to.
Exactly. Yeah. But
so what in your mind, this could be items, ingredients, tactics, whatever, goes into good audio?
I mean, the kind of obvious thing is like, of course, the gear. Like, I mean, but that's kind of like obvious, a prerequisite. Like, having really great audio gear is a huge part of it. Like I mentioned before, like pre-pro, I think, I mean, I'm never brought on for pre-production ever, for location scouts or anything. And anytime that I'm on set and I'm like struggling, I'm like, man, it would have been nice to know.
A 10-minute call, could have fleshed all that out.
It would have been nice to be able to talk with wardrobe. It would have been nice to be able to talk with locations and see what's happening or what, like, and I think that that's a big part of what would make things better if you're trying to get great audio. But I mean, a lot of it is too like just rolling with the punches and just like not getting too freaked out and just approaching every single situation like kind of, I mean, I don't know how to describe it. Like, I mean, this is a hard question to answer too. Like,
it's subjective.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, to just show up. I mean, like, really, honestly, to get good audio, just show up with the gear and take everything that you can with a grain of salt and work with every department. Make friends with PAs. That's a huge thing.
Yeah.
I mean, probably the number one thing is just simply mic placement, though, and put it right here.
Yep.
You know.
So getting into that, I think I've kind of deduced that you follow the same practice that we do, thank God, because I would trust your expertise a lot more than our own. But we tend to both boom and lav our talent.
Mm-hmm.
Is that a recommended practice? Why is it important? I mean, I think we both know the answer, but just kind of for everybody else.
Yeah, I think a lot of it, there's a variety of things. I mean, like redundancy, like I said earlier, like there's a lot of situations where like, if you're most things I work on, they require you to hide the lav. Most things, it's not like a TikTok video where you can just like hold the thing. Because I see TikTok videos and kids are just holding the lav right there. And I'm
clip
like,
the Rode to like a twig now.
And I'm so jealous because it sounds great.
Yes.
And they can have it right there. I'm like,
Yes.
oh, I wish I could just have, but when you're hiding the lav, it's like you're opening yourself up to so many problems. I mean, wireless lavs in general, it's like you're bringing frequency issues and all that kind of stuff, which can be hell, especially when there's Teradeks and there's all kinds of phones and lights and metal and all this kind of stuff. And depending on the location too, plus T-Mobile bought a bunch of the frequencies. So just everything is, that it brings in one wireless lav. People are like, oh, just stick a lav and a boom. And it's like, just adding the lav is a large like bundle of shit to deal with.
Yes.
But yeah, most of it is like redundancy. So like, but it's also the difference between like, a wireless transmitter is very expensive, but like the mic that's going into it's like a $300 or $400 mic. They're great mics. I personally use Sync and Cause 11s, these omnidirectional ones, and they're solid. But it's still like the difference between like a $2,200 Sheps mic and a $300 lavalier. It's gonna sound different, and one's gonna sound better. And I always say, like, if you want perfect, beautiful sounding audio, then we got to get it on the boom. Like you can get great stuff, and that's me being picky and kind of.
We're the same way.
Yeah.
Admittedly, I mean, I'm using the lav as if something bad happens to the boom,
totally
sort of redundancy, like you said. We go with the hide the lav all the time theory, just because I don't know, I just like the look. That's just kind of our way to go about it. makes it difficult.
Yeah.
But we just like how it comes together. Because again, visually, I want you to not be thinking about, oh, I can see that, so now I'm focusing on it. What are some best practices to laving talent?
Ooh, I mean, there's a lot to it actually, and you know, I think that's a bit. It's a lot of bedside manner, you know, and especially, you know, the type of person you're dealing with too. I always ask, you know, have you been loved before? And it's a silly question. I mean, I'll ask like a famous person that as a joke because, you know, like, of course they have been loved. But oftentimes I'll say, have you been loved before? Are you familiar with the process? And then if they haven't, then I kind of say, you know, like, I'm going to be in your personal space. And, you know, for me as a male, like if it's ever a woman, I always make sure, like, do you need a woman on set? Would you feel more comfortable? You know, I try to just, you can feel someone's, you know, how comfortable they are. And a lot of the time, if you come at them with a really good energy, positive, hey, like, you know, just be nice and treat them regularly, you know, it makes them more, like, it's easier, more malleable to, like, you know, because you do have to, like, kind of get in their shit a little bit, and it can be awkward. But yeah, just you know, like when I walk behind somebody, I another thing, you know, my dad always told me was like, treat it like you're a masseuse. Whenever you're at the massage table, they're supposed to keep a hand on you, even when they're behind you. Let them know where you are and what you're doing. So when I walk behind somebody, even if it feels weird and they're having a conversation with a producer or something, I still will say, all right, I'm walking behind you now. I'm going to lift your shirt up. I'm going to attach this. I tell them every step of the way so that they know exactly they're not thinking, why is he lifting up my shirt? You know, like they don't know that I'm not being a weirdo. Like, so you have to kind of like assume that they don't know anything about this process, and just, you know, it helps them. And most of the time by the end, they're like, yeah, right, whatever, do what you got to do. And then it kind of lets things move a little more freely. But, you know, and that's for non-actors. You know, I do a lot of like interviews with people who are just civilians and not familiar with production. So that's another part, is like making them feel comfortable really translates to how they act on screen. So like making that process before they're being recorded even pleasant makes them easier to film.
Right.
And that's a huge part too, that I think a lot of crews, like how a crew works together too, is a huge part of any of that. But that's like a whole other topic. But yeah, like just communicating with the talent or the subject, and being sensitive if they don't like it too, just being quick, you know, like we were talking about, you know, Giannis and stuff earlier, and you know, he doesn't love to be mic'd up, you know, and they're very sensitive to especially at that level, they're very sensitive to like people listening to what they're saying and stuff like that. And that goes for, you know, famous people, actors, politicians, anything like that. And so, you know, being sensitive to that too, and just when they want you to be quick, just being quick, getting in there, putting it on, like. And that's also, you know, it's a difficult thing when you're working with big name talent like that, is like, it can be difficult to like, I can't like go back in over and over and over and try to find the best place for the lav. You know, there's a lot of situations where like, we have him for an hour and we don't have 15 minutes to find the best lav placement, you know? And so you kind of got to roll with it and hope for the best. I did a thing for WhatsApp last year with Giannis and Hassan Minhaj, the comedian. And we had both of them for a very limited amount of time. They were playing this game of horse. So they're playing basketball. They're moving around. They're in, and I was like, I'd, you know, been up for like 3 days before, just like, okay, how am I going to approach this? Like, what, you know, and you can think about it and try to plan it all you want, but when you get in there, it's like, you know, shit's moving, things are happening. So, and I chose a place to put the lav here on Hassan and on Giannis, and it sounds amazing. You know, the sound gods were definitely smiling on me that day for sure. But yeah, just like kind of just feeling it out and doing your best. I mean, like it sounds so basic, but like there is a lot of like, especially when you're working under these circumstances where you're kind of like, you're expected to show up and get it all right. Like just keep a level head. Try to do your best and see what happens. I mean, like and that's a difficult thing too, because, you know, when you have a whole bunch of people backing you up in post-production, you have less to worry about, you know, but when you don't, it's kind of like I'm expected, again, like I said earlier, to like deliver cinema quality audio. And so like, you know, I try to not think about that too much, but you know, it can be daunting when you're like, oh, I really need to get this perfect, because they're not going to do ADR. They're not going to fly Giannis and Hassan back out to LA to do, you know, pickups or ADR. Like, and I mean, like Lord of the Rings was like 90% ADR.
Oh, wow.
Which I was like, man, that must have been an amazing job for the sound mixers, because all they were recording basically is reference. Like trying to get on-set location, like sound effects and stuff like that, and then getting what they can, but like with the knowledge that everything, with that, all the craziness that's going on the set like that, like, and I was like, man, that would have been a great job where they're like, if it doesn't sound bad, they don't give a shit. Yeah, like
we're planning on ADR anyway, so.
I wish I had more experiences with ADR, but.
Moving forward, kind of, you slightly led into it, but I kind of want to talk more specifically about, I guess the way I would put it is equipment, but so like, for example, like we use foamies or sofoamies and, you know, double-sided or tape and stuff to get on talent and stuff for labs, but like maybe it's equipment, maybe it's tactic. How do you kind of reduce some of the wind, the rustle, that sort of thing?
I mean, admittedly, I keep it really, really simple. I use 3M transport tape 90% of the time. Some of it is just for ease. I have found that like sometimes you can spend all this time creating a moleskin sandwich and all this stuff, and it still doesn't work for the type of clothing that they're wearing or the size of their body or whatever's, you know, happening. Like sometimes you have too thin of a shirt, so it's like you created this big thing and now they can see it through. Yeah, and like, so there's I use these Cos 11 lavalier mics, and they have this little thing called an RM11. It's just a little piece of rubber. And I usually just slide it in there, tape it on, and you know, there are circumstances like on the Hassan Giannis job, I use these little like foam. They're kind of like the Ursa Mini things, but they kind of just go around, and you know, anything. I mean, each shirt and each shoot is so different, so it is kind of like, try one thing, like if it doesn't work, switch it out, try another thing. And you know, unfortunately, when you're, again, working under really tight schedules and stuff, sometimes you're like, you didn't make the right decision. And that's very humbling and difficult, especially like, you know, I've been doing this for like 20 years or so. And it's like, you know, to know that like you can still fuck up, you know, you can still like try to make the best decision and it didn't work. And that doesn't happen as much. I mean, I feel like, yeah, you can make the wrong lens choice maybe, or make the wrong light choice, but like but also people, they'll give camera and lighting all the time in the world to reset.
Well,
you know?
and visually there's camera, there's lens, there's light, there's audio is microphone placement, go. So it's a lot more amplified when those things do go just a little askew, because there's so many less variables to the end result than there is from a visual standpoint.
And they got 3 hours for prep.
Right.
And then I have the subject for 5 minutes. And then they go out in the world. And then anything on there where it's like, if they're out there and I don't often I have my, you know, gear on set, but you know, talent is in the green room, and sometimes I'm not able to like do a check in there. They want, you know, you have 2 minutes to mic them and then you're done. And so anytime you're like making any adjustments, you're stopping the whole production. You're stopping, you know, 50 people and everybody's looking at you. And that's a hard thing too. But also being willing to say like, that we have to stop. Yeah. And I sometimes you have to kind of feel out the situation of like, am I going to stop this whole production? Am I going to interrupt this person's story? You know, and that's a situation where you're like, do I have it on the lav or do I have it on the boom? If you're good on that one, then just let it ride. Like I recently did a bunch of ads for Senator Tammy Baldwin. And
I loved how those turned out.
They were great. Thank you.
All of them were great.
I mean, that's a lot on the. I mean, I guess I shouldn't sell myself short, but you know, the production crew was great. But you know, there was this circumstance where I think we were interviewing like a woman whose son had passed away from an overdose and all this stuff. It was a very sensitive, touching moment. And there was a moment where like the lav wasn't sounding as good. They were doing a lot of movement. She was kind of bending over and you know, but they were like almost crying. And the boom was there, and the boom sounded good. Maybe the boom wasn't as perfect as I would have liked, but I made a decision where I was like, I'm not going to interrupt this because everybody's going to look at me annoyed. They'd rather get this moment than have me stop it, you know? So being able to, you know when that's the right moment to, you know, interject, say, I have to stop this or not. And when I was, I worked on the Adult Swim show, Joe Para Talks With You, which shot here in Milwaukee. And, you know, that was also when it came to lavs, you know, I'm laving up 7-8 people at a time. And, you know, you're trying to get everything perfect and all that stuff. So having a great boom op too, shout out to Taryn, who's my boom op for that. But, you know, having a boom op who can cover your ass too when you're like, I need that covered because her lav is not good. And, you know, we have 25 pages. We have to go to 3 locations. You know, we're already behind schedule. Like, you know, it's not an easy thing. So, you know, I don't know. And I've gone off topic.
No,
for
that's
sure.
okay. I want to get your take on this because this is just kind of a curiosity thing for myself. Obviously, you know, there's brand loyalty within like, I like the sound of this microphone or that microphone, but have you had any experience or heard of, and maybe I'm totally off base in this question and it doesn't exist, but I feel like I've heard it somewhere, where like you could prep different microphones for different like voice tones or like higher pitched, lower pitched. Is that something you practice or know about?
In my experience, I mean, like for many years, I used a Sennheiser 416, and that was the only mic that I had in my package. You know, like when I was starting out. And I think you can. I mean, you can get real in the weeds about like, oh, this is a perfect. But so much of it is not just the person's voice or how they sound, but it's also like the room and the acoustics and what's in the room, the size of the room, and what kind of like does it have linoleum floors or carpeting? Like a lot of those things can affect. You know, you'd think that this mic would work perfect for this particular circumstance, and it doesn't. You know, like and so you do kind of there is no like set where you're like, oh, this is, you know, deep voice, definitely use this one. Like, and you know, I kind of just kind of go with how it sounds a lot of the time. I think that, you know, the biggest like tool I have is my ears more than obviously the recorder and the microphone, right? But like, you know, like how it sounds is all that matters in the end. And so whatever you have to do, and if you get too stuck in the weeds of like, oh, well, you know, this one has this kind of cardioid pattern and it would be perfect for this, and like you can think about it almost too much. Sometimes it's better like get the mic out there, see how it sounds.
Is that if maybe picking up pennies, stepping over dollars, kind of to maybe I'm worrying too much about something that maybe I can EQ a little bit in post, or maybe just you can get lost in the weeds. But I mean, having a solid collection of microphones that you can switch out and being ready to do that and being like, I think this one will sound better. And like I said, like you can think, oh, this one will work perfect in this environment, but it's actually, they have really high ceilings and you know, so great production.
Exactly. Yeah. Take your audio people on location scouts, please.
Amen to that.
But yeah, I don't tend to like prescribe to any particular like rules when it comes to just make sure it sounds good and don't hold up production too much.
Yes,
and don't try to like, you know, you don't try to do too much almost to a certain, I mean, like you want to do a good job, but like there's a certain point where you're like, are you making your job more difficult? Are you stressing yourself out about something where it's like this video is going to be played on people's phones? Yes. You know, like, so like, you know, are you not getting the frequency response that you wanted or whatever? Like that you know, and I don't want to like sound like I'm like, who gives a fuck? But like, you know, don't overthink shit.
It's true. I mean, you have thousands of dollars of equipment to get the best audio for in the best world case. People that are listening to it on their phones are getting 80%, let's say, of the frequency response that you're actually capturing.
Even less, for sure.
So like visually, like dynamic range, you're losing maybe a couple stops because you're the fidelity of the device that your end result is.
Yeah, I mean, like,
I'm going on a tangent, but
I guess maybe I'm like a little bit being like things that I just do naturally. Maybe I'm not like spelling it out enough because they're gain staging and like making sure that like you have enough headroom and giving post what they need and making sure like your noise floors aren't too high. Like there's a lot of things like that I guess do now without thinking and just.
Well, I mean, with how long you've done it, it makes sense.
It does come with just like where you're just like I don't really think about a lot of it too much and it's like I live it constantly. So it's haunting me day in and day out. I dream about, productions and shit. So it's like, that's also why I'm like, when the IRS is like, how much are you like, oh, is this a business expense? I'm like, my whole life is a business expense. Like the amount of time that I spend thinking about all of this shit, it's like, I'm never not
especially
on
as a
the
business
clock.
owner, there's no off.
Yeah. My tax guy was like, you got to cool it because like you can't just write off everything. And I was like, but I'm literally always working. Like I'm in the car and going anywhere and I'm,
that's miles, baby.
Yeah, exactly. I'm like insufferable to be around. Like ask any of my ex-girlfriends. Like it's any meal we have, it's a business expense for me because I'm just talking about being on set constantly. Like but whatever. It pays the bills, buys the meal. So
right.
It is what it is.
I think the thing that I love, because I just love nerding out, is what's in people's kits. So I think maybe a lot of people watching that don't that try to maybe wear all the hats might be like, oh, I have a Rode NTG5 and a boom pole and it goes into the camera and I'm sweet. But that's not on location big boy sound, big girl sound mixing. So what's in your kit? How do you go through your process in that regard?
Well, right now, I have a sound device, a 633 and a 688, and then I also have an old school 744, which is like their first digital sound mixer, and then so I'm all like the older series. They have Sound Devices has a whole new 8 series recorder that is amazing, and like I saw a lot of people getting them during like right after COVID and stuff.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm like, I love them. I think that they're great machines. But I also had to like weigh as a business owner, like what kind of ROI, what am I getting for it? And like, there's a lot of benefits to the newer recorders and I am planning on upgrading, soon, but I've had to make a lot of decisions, especially, COVID fucked shit up pretty hard. But so I a lot of the things, that I would have liked to make in terms of gear purchases over the last few years, I've had to really prioritize, just making sure I can pay shit off. And, so it's been a little bit of a struggle, but, Sound Devices is like my go-to sound mixer and recorder. Like Zach's comms are great. And I respect the Sonys, but Sound Devices is kind of the preeminent. Like they're the industry standard, and I stand by them, and they're a Wisconsin company, so shout out to them. And then I have, a variety of shotgun mics, Sheps, Sennheiser, and a couple cheap things, but some pretty solid. Like I have a MKH70, I have a 50, I have a 416. I have a CMIT 5U. I have an older Sheps CMC. I think those are all the ones. And then I have like a couple. Like I have an SM7B and a SM50 and stuff like that. And then I use for my wireless lavs. I only use Electrosonics wireless mics, and I was a pretty hardcore 411A. I don't know if this might be getting too in the weeds.
No, please,
in terms
that's
of
why we're here.
Electrosonics, the 411s kind of have been this old school. They've been used for the last decade, last 15 years. And they're just really, really solid. So I was using those for quite a long time, longer than most people. Everybody else had kind of gone on to the dual receivers and all this stuff. But I was On Para, I had 8 411s, and I used what I felt comfortable with. I didn't really worry about like, do I have the best gear? Is it the newest stuff? Is it like all I care about is like my ability to use it, and if it delivers quality audio. So Electro are my go-to wireless transmitters and receivers. Sennheiser G4 for camera hops. I have a couple Denicky timecode slates, and then a couple Denicky timecode lock boxes, and some ambient locket boxes that are older, but camera people hate them because they're only like a few years old, but they're like this big, and camera people want everything to, they'll have 1,000 things on camera, but I add one more box and they'll lose their minds. But yeah, so that is, but mostly Denicky timecode stuff, and Comtex for client monitoring, and then just all the. I get in trouble from like documentary filmmakers and stuff a lot because after working on enough like narrative stuff and being caught in situations where like, when something goes down on set, like in my circumstance, like if I only bring one mic and that mic goes down, then the whole production is fucked. So I always make sure that I have backups for everything. It means I bring an extra Pelican or two. And, documentary filmmakers are used to like a camera guy just having like a pouch on his side. And they're good. Yeah, they don't even have a case. They just expect you to carry around the camera, which is like, I totally get it. But, they'll be like, oh, and we need 5 lavs. And then it's like, well, I need to bring all this stuff that supports it. And then, so I do end up bringing a lot of extra stuff. But I make sure I have every cable, every adapter, every, if the recorder goes down, I have a backup recorder ready. If I have a microphone go down or a boom pole, like there's so many variables that can go wrong that you don't want to get caught, like being like, there's nothing I can do. And then we have to like cancel the shoot or like, that's not an option. So, so I always make sure I have a ton of backups of everything, batteries, like the BDS, the battery distribution system that I have extra ones of that, like power cables, everything. So, that's like my basic kit. Like I said, if COVID hadn't happened, I think I'd be in a different position. I had a big come up with doing Para. I bought a lot of equipment for that show. And then, if things had, I was gonna do like, if things had gone how they were supposed to, I think I might be in a different gear situation now, but I'm pretty happy with everything. I don't have a lot of people request for 32-bit float, and I don't really need all the extra EQ stuff that all these newer recorders have. And, there will be a point where I have to upgrade, but I've been pretty happy with it. And truthfully, like, I know a lot of the sound mixers around me, like, they always want to make sure. I think there's a little bit of like ego where they're like, I have the newest sound mixer.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
Truthfully, like no client is like, oh, is that the 8 series? Oh, you only have a 6 series? Like, no, they don't care. Like a 24-bit 48K poly wave file, if you recorded it right, it's gonna sound essentially the same. There's a few benefits definitely to having the new stuff, but and I think that's a good lesson for anybody who's getting into it, whether you sound or anything. It's like, you do have to, especially when you're in a small market and you're in this kind of like, this isn't LA. We're not working on, we're not working 300 days of the year on features and stuff. So we can't just approach it with this, like, I always have the best gear, the most expensive stuff. Cause it's like, you have to pay your rent and shit. Like we have to make sure we're getting a proper ROI and that we're, keeping things profitable as profitable as you can. You're running a business. So, but yeah, I think that's my whole kit. Oh, K-Tech boom poles.
I was gonna ask you that off camera because I bought I don't even remember what brand, but it was an integrated cable, and I saw that yours were integrated. I'm like, son of a gun, I want one that he's got because mine, one of the tiers just came right out. And now it won't retighten.
Oh, that's
so it's
that must be one of the old school. Like
it wasn't it might have been like a newer or something, something like that. But I was like, ooh,
yeah, that's.
So now I have a great, 4, 5, whatever 6 foot it is, because it still works. Like there's nothing wrong with the cable. It's just I can't
just use it as I use those. I use my older boom poles, like the ones that aren't the carbon fiber ones and stuff. I use those for antenna stuff. Like I just use them to like post things up now.
That's a good idea. So I actually had this question because
I'm gonna take a little.
Yeah, please. I thought you'd be all in on this, but now I'm kind of maybe learning that it's not the case. 32-bit.
Yeah.
So I want you, if you could just kind of explain, maybe somebody doesn't know what 32-bit is, why might it be important? I agree, somebody who's skilled at operating, you don't necessarily need the 32-bit because obviously, you're not peaking anyway, whatever. But, somebody who might be solo on set or something might want that flexibility. So if you just kind of explain.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, since I don't have any 32-bit stuff, I'm probably not the best person to speak directly on it, but my understanding, especially like a lot of the newer like sound devices bought a company called Audio Limited, which makes wireless mics. So they were, and all their wireless, their A20s and stuff like that are all 32-bit. So like they'll never clip, which is like a huge thing for wirelesses, and not having to adjust the gain is like a huge thing too. So I mean, like it is the future for sure. Like I don't want to sound like I'm like it'll never be used. Like it's definitely how things will be. But I think that just post-production workflows haven't necessarily reached that point where it's like if you give somebody 32-bit when they didn't ask for it, that can actually cause problems in their post-production. So like, until I start getting like specific requests, I probably won't upgrade till then.
Yeah, because we invest. I mean, obviously, like the cameras on board is never 32-bit,
right?
Which is whatever. But we invested in a Zoom F3, just a little 2-port, which is great because like if we have to do an event and it's just like just get a feed, we can plug it in, don't have to worry about it.
That's a perfect example.
The only thing I have to do is make sure it doesn't die.
Right? Yeah, totally. No, totally. That's a perfect and that little recorder too is actually super. I like when I saw that I'm really stingy with my money too. Like,
right.
So I really want it. Like I want to buy all kinds of shit constantly, but I saw that and I was like, that would be great for like kind of what you're like, kind of set it and go like. Yeah. And especially for like car rigs and stuff, like there's a lot of situations where, especially on like lower budget features and stuff, they don't have like a follow car. They're not putting cars on these big things where you can like rig shit up how you want. They're driving an actual car that's really moving. So you usually have to like set a bag in the trunk and let it go. And so having the freedom to know like, you don't have to worry about it clipping and stuff like that is a huge boon. And truthfully, like now that we're talking about it, I probably should go buy it. Especially now that I booked like a couple weeks of jobs. I'm like, no, I think I can afford it. But that's a huge thing too. Don't spend your money before you got it.
Right.
Because you don't know how long they're gonna take to pay you, and you don't know if that job is gonna go away. Like that, totally off topic, but that's a self-employed skill that save your money when it's busy and don't spend it till you got it.
So selfishly, I want to ask, because I hate this part about audio, boom mopping specifically. How do you keep them shoulders from burning out?
Being basically an Adonis, being the strongest man alive helps. Cheating. Like some of it is like having the endurance. Because I was a runner in high school, I think I learned how to, and also I've been in a lot of pain from car accidents and stuff when I was a kid. So like I've learned, I think I have a higher pain threshold, a little higher. So like, but I mean, little tricks, like, when you're holding it, like putting more on this arm for 30 seconds, then putting more on this arm, and then resting it on your head, and then putting one arm down, then putting one other arm down. Like resting on my head I probably have a divot in the top of my head because I rest my boom on my head.
They should make a headphone with a little
I've thought
or 3D,
about that.
3D
Yes.
print a little
Totally.
thing.
Yes. Like a little.
Boy, we just came. Somebody can have that one for free.
I mean, if you know, Easy Rig, the
Yep.
company for cameras and stuff, they just did a thing at NAB.
Is it the zombie rig?
I'm not sure. I don't know if that's what it's called.
I saw one that was like, it has like 2 arms that like come into like a hip thing, and it like stabilizes it so you don't
for
have
the
to,
boom. Yeah, I think this a sound mixer named Lauren Banjo, who's an amazing sound mixer. She just had like one of her videos from NAB go viral. It had like 90,000 views or something, and I was like, there's not even that many sound mixers in this. But yeah, I saw that it's like $2,500, and it like you just have to like turn it. And so I'm considering for next long project. For my boom op's sake, I probably
that
will.
might be a rent and see, and then
Exactly, yeah. Because it's the $2,500. I was talking to Bob Donnelly about that from North American Camera, and he was like, "Oh, you should get that." And I was like, "It's $2,500." And he was like, "You're gonna save that in chiropractic bills if you spend the money on it." And I was like, "That's true."
Is Bob getting one that we could?
I don't know. I mean, he maybe I'll talk him into doing it. I just rent him, like test it out through him. Yeah.
Let's see, if your rental is this, and I'm offsetting your purchase price, then
Yeah. You know, and that's a huge thing about a lot of local people and a lot of in the sound community too, where whenever we rent to each other, we're always really good about like, you know, we build in enough so that people can make money off of the rentals and stuff. I always try to rent to other sound mixers a little lower than what they're going to rent to the client, so that there's a little buffer, so we can all make a little money. Even because I hate just like taking advantage of other sound mixers too. I'm like, we're in the same boat. Like, let me make $20 extra, please.
Right.
Like, sometimes it matters. But.
So we talked a little bit before we hit record about some work that you've been on. You know, you've been blessed to do a lot of work with the Bucks and Giannis specifically, Dame specifically. I want to open it up more than how I posed it before we started, and I'll let you kind of pick what angle you want to take. What economic impact has that had on the city as a whole? And or, you know, just what's your experience been?
I love the Milwaukee Bucks, and they are the greatest team in the NBA. Giannis's presence, like in this city, and Dame too, and even like Bobby, like all of them have been, you know, are so kind of involved in the community.
We're blessed to have a lot of great people.
Yeah, like they're good dudes, like great basketball players, of course, but like good people. But like having like people that are on, you know, these kind of superstar levels where there's giant companies coming into town, you know, like it's been huge for the film production community. I don't think you can overestimate how much that's done, because I mean, simply putting money into people's pockets obviously is like the obvious, you know, big benefit is we're all able to pay our bills. We're all able to continue doing this. But like the level at which we're asked to perform and what's expected of us is really like can't be estimated either, because that kind of like mental sharpness and kind of how to operate as a crew member on those kinds of shoots, like that's what makes you better, and we need that so much in this community. And we don't get a lot of opportunities. Our lack of, you know, tax incentives. So there's not a huge number of like outside companies that come in. And, you know, for me as a sound mixer, I get lucky. I get a lot of out of town crews, and I'm usually the only local or one of 2 or 3 local people. So I end up working with a lot of different crews, more than the average person. But like, you know, I think there's a lot of, because of, you know, specifically Giannis, and Dame, and you know, there's a lot of huge companies, big, like hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of productions that are coming in, and we're all just having to execute at this like level that we haven't been really asked to execute before, and it's been amazing, because just watching people get comfortable like in these very high stress environments with, you know, big name directors and stuff like that too. You know, like there was a Google thing, and the guy who's the director of Black Swan was there. You know, like all these like kind of, it's just a weird environment where you're like, oh, I never thought that would be happening here in Milwaukee. And, but yeah, the economic impact of course, but like just making us all better at our jobs, has been incredible to watch and experience. And, you know, it's a huge, you know, like the investment into the team that the city made as well as the organization made. There haven't been a lot of experiences that I've had in this city where I've seen this outside investment happen and then it's ended up with money in my pocket.
Mm-hmm. So my final question is, let's say there's somebody who's either interested in becoming a sound mixer, whether it's on location, whatever. I mean, there's 18 other episodes that we could have complete conversations about, but for the sake of today, we'll end it with this. They're looking into getting into on location sound. What's the lowest hanging fruit for them to start with? Is that, I don't want to answer for you, but it could be equipment, skill, etc.
That is a really good question. 'Cause like, there's a part of me that's like, you know, getting to be able to operate at a certain level, you do have to have like the equipment that kind of comes along with that. And so there's a little bit of like, if you really want to do it, and then you have to kind of go in with both feet, and you can't just like dip your toe. You can't like, and this sounds really privileged for me to say this, but like, there's a certain point where you have to be like, this is what I'm doing. You can't like be having a full-time job and I mean, again, that's really easy for me to say, but you know, knowing someone's financial situation, like it's a different case, but jump in with both feet, make the investment, take the risk, you know, like put yourself in debt, you know, like seriously, like it, and this is why
Not
I'm like,
financial advice.
do not listen to me, but like fuck it, like take the risk. If you really want to do it, then like have faith in yourself and believe in yourself. And now also that's coming from someone who was basically born into the industry, and I didn't have to break into it like other people. So there's almost like I don't know, have a dad who's a sound mixer, you know, like come on guys. No, but like
Totally tangible things you can all control.
Exactly. Yeah. Everybody should just have Sean Egan as your father. To your point, hit up me or hit up Bill Armstrong or Brian Liston or any of the other sound mixers, you know, Dan Harmon, and see what people are, Jake Fatke, you know, see what people are saying and see who you mesh with too. 'Cause like, you know, some people I don't vibe with as well as I wish I would or something, but, and get what you can from them and show them the respect that they deserve because they're teaching you how to be their replacement or competition to a certain extent.
Yeah.
And that's a difficult thing too. And that's where the difficult comes with being a mentor is like being okay with training someone who might take a job from you in the future. And that's very difficult in a small market. But yeah, I think just find a mentor and listen to them, you know, and ask questions and be respectful, and you know that will take and be humble and like be confident, but don't think you're the shit. 'Cause like, I mean, in this environment, especially with the equipment and the gear always changing and every job being totally different, whether you're narrative or advertising or anything, it's like just be a pleasure to work with and be a good person and ask people questions, because it doesn't matter how much experience you have, you're always learning. You're always trying to get better. There's always something you can be doing better. You can learn something new from someone who's just starting out as much as you can from somebody who's been doing it for 45 years. So just, you know, keeping your mind open and staying humble a little bit. And also like, you know, knowing you're the shit too is important as well. But
it's okay to have confidence. I mean, if you are good at what you do, it's okay to have confidence.
You kind of have to a certain extent too. Like if you want to be out in the world, you kind of have to, especially in this environment too, where you kind of you're on a crew with a bunch of different people, and there's a lot of different personalities, and that's a huge selling point I think for anybody who's trying to get into the game, whether it's audio or anything. Is like make sure you're like a pleasant person, you know, and if you're not, like, work on that or acknowledge that you're not. Cause I see a lot of people that are just like think it's, I mean, I see it a lot more in the older generations and the old school people where they're like, they think that being like a cranky asshole is like endearing or like that's how it's done.
I had to roll up the spool when I was done.
Yeah. You kids got it so easy. And it's like, whatever, dude. Like, yeah, it's but yeah, just stay positive out there, you know, and charge the highest rates you can.
And with that, where can people find your work?
On the television, on TV.
True. Very true.
I mean, I post a lot of stuff on my website. I periodically try to put the newest stuff up, but like, yeah, I mean,
your handles, etc.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. On Instagram, Eganomics is my personal page, and Egan Audio is my business page. Eganomics has 8 X's because I'm super like obnoxious. And you can go to Spotify and listen to my music too under Eganomics as well, and help me get to 1 million plays on one of my songs, which I'm just about to.
What were you at, like 250,000 streams a year? I was looking through your.
Oh yeah, my Spotify Wrapped.
Yeah.
My Spotify Wrapped went down this year. But
yeah, there's only.
I literally
one other way that it can go.
I didn't put any music out all year. I didn't promote myself at all. So getting like 200,000 or 300,000 plays is fucking. I'm totally fine with it. Like I don't want. It's tough being a musician and wanting people to hear your music, but also like not wanting people to look at you. I don't want to be perceived, like, which is weird to say like on camera, but yeah, I don't. It's a delicate balance. I like being behind the camera. I like being in the studio. I don't really want people to like, you know, I don't want people to follow me, but you can. Just don't be mad if I block you.
And with that, we're going to wrap up today. So whatever platform you're listening to us on, video, audio, hit the good buttons. And without a doubt, go check his work out. And maybe you'll see yourself on the set with him at some point. So thank you so much for watching. And we'll see you guys next time.